Hey folks, I'm Thomas. I'm one of the gunsmiths here at Cajun. Y'all have told us that we need to make more videos, and we couldn't agree more. So here's the very first one, and hopefully many to come. So what I have laying here is an SB01 frame, tactical sport frame. This is actually the new TS2 frame, and then a P01 Decocker. And so you'll notice that some people ask us if we can convert a manual safety to Decocker and vice versa in the 75 series guns if it's a non-Omega. And the answer is it's just not practical. And the reason being is because you can see even in the frame, the hole for the manual safety is just a round hole. Here you have kind of an elongated detent, and that's because on the lever it has a little nub that presses down on the trigger bar as it decocks the hammer. And then also you have all these differences in the gun. The hammer's different, the sear cage is different, the trigger bar's different. By the time you got through paying for all those parts and the work and everything, you'd be at the price of a new gun. So just not practical to convert one over. You could take two SB01 manual safeties next to each other and pull the triggers, and you may get out of the box a 5-pound single action on one, a 6-pound single action on the other. Double action on one may be 10 pounds and the next one be 12. And that's just because there's a lot of variation in the guns. There may be some overspray in the hammer well that the hammer's dragging on. There may be some parts that aren't worn in very well. And there may be some tolerance stacking so that some of the parts just don't quite line up, and that adds up to kind of poor trigger pulls. And so that can happen from model to model. It can happen from gun to gun, which there's nothing that's going to say that the average Decocker, the average manual safety is better than another gun. So some of the differences though here that we will show you is that in the SB01 here, you can see that hammer cocked, I can pull on this trigger, and if you're not going to be able to see this in the video probably, but as I kind of wiggle this trigger back and forth, if you were looking really close, you can actually see the entire sear cage moving back and forth with the hammer, and you can kind of see the hammer camming back. And the reason it does that is because what holds this in the gun is nothing but the safety lever. And it's just wedged into a notch in the frame, and that's what keeps it in there. So you can't ever have it too tight, because if you were to shim this to the point to where it didn't move at all, you probably wouldn't be able to activate your safety and flip it back and forth like you can on this model. To fight that, in the TAC Sport models, you will see, and even in the Checkmate, in the back of the sear cage, they've actually put some springs in the very back of these notches, and that keeps enough tension on the sear cage so that as you pull the trigger and the single action brakes, the hammer doesn't cam back like it does in all the other manual safety models. And so that keeps enough tension to keep the sear cage from moving back, but not so much that it's hard to activate the safety. Whereas in the Decocker gun, what you have is the sear pin, instead of being like this one where it just holds the sear together, and which also makes this really easy to work on. In the Decocker, the pin goes all the way through the frame. So this sear cage is in there pretty tight. It won't move at all. And when I squeeze the trigger on this and rock it back and forth, you'll see a little bit of camming because the sear is riding up on the hammer hooks, but the sear cage doesn't move at all. There are some guns where you might can get a more crisp single action out of a Decocker gun, but it's pretty minimal. And so when you stack these guns up next to each other, if we were to build a P01 versus a 75 compact for you, the trigger pulls are going to be almost identical. There's really, at the end of the day, no difference between the trigger pulls and the reset on a Decocker versus a manual safety gun. It really just has more to do with the variation in gun from gun, and just because they're mass produced.